Time for our missing topic. This mind-blowing image really grabbed our imagination. A sprawling metropolitan street with giant skyscrapers appears to have been completely ravaged by vines and foliage. Grass grows in between the cracks on the sidewalk and there's not a soul in sight. We couldn't find out too much about this astonishing image, so what do you guys think? Do you think it's a real cityscape? Or is it a prediction of a future where humans leave their urban surroundings? Burj Al Babas, Turkey. The ill-fated Burj Al Babas in Turkey was one of the biggest property development faults imaginable. This fairy tale housing complex cost over $150 million to construct before plans fell through and the housing estate was left unfinished. These homes may look like Disney castles, but the project itself is far from its own happy ending. When the property developers responsible for this Turkish dream village went bankrupt, several investors withdrew their funding and Burj Al Babas became a nightmare. The abandoned site now looks like a weird ghostly theme park. Only a few sales were made of the homes and they were left roughly $25 million in debt. Locals in the Medrano area reportedly hate the houses and consider the construction site an eyesore, and the houses not in keeping with their traditional wooden houses of the region. Even the government has changed the law so that only low-rise houses that fit the style and tradition of the region can be built. Yeah, the bubble well and truly burst with Burj Al Babas, and this abandoned city of castles is in serious need of a fairy godmother. Can anyone wave a magic wand and magic up some cash? Chernobyl, Ukraine, at unlucky number 13. It's the most famous abandoned town in the world. That's right, we're talking about the site of the world's most famous nuclear reactor disaster, Chernobyl. This creepy location is still radioactive. However, it continues to attract daredevils from across the globe. It's not our idea of a relaxing vacation, but to each their own. Yeah, the town of Pripyat became the epicenter of a deadly and devastating nuclear disaster on September 26, April 1986, and the effects of the fateful day are still felt decades later. The town was evacuated, and many workers and their families never to return. The city became a ghost town, with nature growing wild and rampant throughout the urban center. Sightings of mutant animals glowing in the dark became part of local legend, and the high levels of radiation kept most people away from the Chernobyl disaster site. Reports of terrible illness and mutations in the region went viral in the global press, and a morbid curiosity grew for this creepy site. Yet over 30 years later, many tourists flocked to the Ukraine to embark on guided tours of Chernobyl, desperate to get a first-hand experience of the spooky town. You can actually visit and explore this abandoned city for yourself. Would you visit this nuclear disaster site for a truly apocalyptic vacation? We want to know. Centralia, USA. If you've ever played the popular horror game Silent Hill, maybe you'll recognize the story of Centralia, the abandoned Pennsylvania mining town. Once a hugely successful mining community, its 1,200 residents lived together in peace and harmony, profiting off the riches of the coal mines deep below the town. Yet Centralia and the coal went hand in hand, and before disaster struck, they had been mining there for an entire century. It was good while it lasted, right? In 1962, a fire broke out in the coal seam below the city, and that fire has been burning ever since, with little hope of it ever going out. When residents decided to clear out one of the city's many landfills in time for a Memorial Day parade, they set the dump alight in order to clear out the trash. However, it's believed that this was the incident that sparked a series of fires in the mining tunnels below the town, creating a huge blaze that was too fierce to extinguish. Sinkholes, gas pouring into basements, and roads cracking under the immense heat were all side effects of the fire, and soon Centralia became condemned. Unable to control the fire, Congress bought out the residents of the town and eliminated the zip code completely. Now all that remains of the ghost town is an abandoned graffiti-sprayed highway and a deadly furnace that bubbles underneath the earth. Geologists have given up all hope of extinguishing the fire, so we recommend steering well clear of this dangerous, deserted city if you are ever passing through Pennsylvania. Hotowin, China. Imagine if plants took over your hometown. This might sound like some kind of cheesy horror movie, but for the former residents of Hotowin, China, this was a reality. Yeah, this successful seaside community was home to about 2,000 fishermen and their families back in the 1990s. However, nowadays it's more of an abandoned garden of paradise. This weird green town suffered economic ruin when nearby Shanghai cornered the fish market, and most of the Hotowin's residents spilled out into the mainland, looking for new jobs. When the people left, the plant life flourished, covering the port town in a thick layer of emerald green foliage, vines, and grass. Even though this once lively city is now an abandoned jungle, you can still visit this overgrown destination, although it might be a long journey. The only way to get there from Shanghai is a 4-hour-long bus and ferry ride, which will take you to Shangshan Island. Then you must hitch a ride or hike to the Green Garden City, and we reckon it would make for some great Instagram photos though. So what do you think? This grassy, deserted city is really quite beautiful despite its sad past. More and more tourists are starting to explore the island with drones and capture the memories of Hotowin, and its unusually wild appearance gives us a glimpse at what the world might look like if humans ever left the planet. Calico, United States. Hold on to your cowboy hats because things are about to get extra spooky around here. This next abandoned city is said to be one of the most haunted places in California, if not the entire United States, making it a literal ghost town. Yeah, we're talking about Calico, a creepy abandoned silver mining town that has now been turned into a carnival-esque theme park for history buffs and paranormal enthusiasts. This affluent town was formed around the 500 silver mines in the San Bernardino area, and people rushed from all over to get rich quick. It took just 2 years for the population of Calico to reach 1,200, and by 1890, there were over 3,500 residents in the prosperous mining town. It all came to an abrupt end when silver prices dropped drastically in 1890, and people began to abandon their homes and search for their next big opportunity. This old Wild West town captured the imagination of tourists both in the States and from across the world. And now you can visit Calico and experience the hotbed of paranormal activity that the mass exodus left behind. Yeah, ghosts wander the otherwise empty streets of Calico, and many spooky sightings of the town's characters have been recorded over the years. From the old teachers and pupils repeating lessons in the long-forgotten schoolhouse to Tumbleweed Harris, the last marshal of Calico, who seems to have never stepped down from duty. Cracco, Italy. In the beautiful Basilicata region of southern Italy, there is an eerie, evacuated town that fell victim to devastating natural disasters. The unique and breathtaking city was built on a steep incline for defense reasons and dates back thousands of years. However, in 1963, a shocking series of landslides forced residents of Cracco to evacuate. The fateful landslides seem to have been caused by works of infrastructure, sewer and water systems. Still, the people of Cracco remained hopeful that they could remain in their beloved home. Disaster struck again, and in 1972, a flood sealed the fate of the city, making living in the center impossible. After a terrible earthquake in 1980, the ancient city was abandoned once and for all, deemed too dangerous to inhabit. Cracco became a ghost town, like so many other old Italian towns. In fact, there's thought to be as many as 20,000 crumbling ghost towns in the country. In modern times, there's been a surge of interest in revamping Cracco, and local people are reinvesting in the ancient city to try and bring life and tourism back to the once condemned town. It's even featured in famous blockbuster movies like The Passion of the Christ and Quantum of Solace. Cool, huh? Kolmanskop, Namibia. This strange yet stunning abandoned town has now been deserted for more than 60 years, causing the harsh terrain to reclaim the site as its own. Yes, Kolmanskop in Namibia was once the home of a huge diamond boom, an astonishingly wealthy town that at one point produced 1 million carats, or 11.7% of the world's total diamond production. It all started in 1908 when a railway worker shoveling a sand dune next to a quiet railway track hit an unusual stone. Showing it to his boss, it turned out to be a diamond, and the area soon became populated by hordes of prospectors looking to make their fortunes. Diamonds were abundant, and this once unassuming patch of desert land became a working site. The site was established by German settlers, and they filled the desolate wasteland with extravagant houses, pubs, and even a bowling alley. However, unfortunately, diamonds are not forever, and the deposits eventually depleted by the early 1930s. With no more precious gems to gather and sell, residents fled the once wealthy town and relocated to another rich diamond field in the south. The sand dunes grew out of control in the ghost town, and once fancy rooms now lay forgotten, filled from floor to ceiling with grit and sand. Yeah, Colemanskop was the town that went from diamonds to dust. UFO City, Taiwan. This next abandoned city was originally planned as a resort for the super rich. However, construction of this weird and futuristic UFO city seemed to be cursed from the very beginning. In 1978, property developers undertook the ambitious project with hopes of capitalizing on wealthy U.S. military officers that were posted in East Asia. However, the expensive pod city would never be finished. Problems started arising after the destruction of a huge ceremonial dragon that blocked the roads into the site. This was considered to be highly inauspicious and very bad luck, and indeed a series of unfortunate events began to plague the city's construction. Car crashes and mysterious deaths led to rumors of hauntings, and the remains of 20,000 skeletal remains were rumored to have been uncovered at the pod city, assumed to be an old 17th century Dutch cemetery. By 1980, the property developers were declared bankrupt, and the site became an abandoned ghost town, with urban explorers flocking from all across the world to snap photos of these so-called ruins of the future. Reports suggest that houses are now demolished and a water park is in the works. We think these UFO pod houses are totally creepy, but what do you think? Would you love to live in a pod like this? Bodie, USA. Bodie, a ghost town in California, looks like a scene straight out of a Tarantino movie, but there's nothing fictional about it. The creepy, dilapidated town has been kept in a state of arrested decay and is preserved in a state of ruin. The once booming town struck gold many times, leading it to become a notorious Wild West settlement. Yet churches, saloons, bars, and general stores popped up in the middle of the desert when capitalists from the city caught wind of the precious gold that lay buried under the earth in Bodie. The population even grew to a massive 8,000 people as the golden ore just kept on coming. With that many money-hungry citizens, the town soon became a hotbed of criminal activity and bad behavior, putting the wild in Wild West. If you can make it out in Bodie, you can make it anywhere. However, nothing good lasts forever, and in 1913, residents abandoned the town, leaving behind their homes and possessions. Soon, not a single soul remained in the ghost town. Nowadays, you can visit the abandoned city and get a slice of life from the mad era of the gold rush and see exactly how they lived thanks to the untouched nature of Bodie. Pyramiden, Norway. This freezing cold island, close to the Arctic Circle, now serves as a creepy Soviet time capsule. Yes, Pyramiden in Norway was once home to the most desired jobs for Soviet bureaucrats, due to the high standard of living and the technically skilled workers that called the mining town home. However, the abandoned Pyramiden is now inhabited by wild animals and has earned itself the nickname of the Utopia at the end of the world. Yet this coal mining facility was once a haven, but the happy times came to an end in the 1990s with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Mining in this icy town was no longer profitable, and in 1996, when a flight from Moscow carrying 141 workers and their families crashed, killing everyone on board, the community of Pyramiden had lost 10% of its population. It never recovered from the tragedy. Now, this chilly Arctic ghost town remains an interesting peek at a long lost way of life. Raguri Vecchio, Italy. And at number 4, let's take you to Raguri Vecchio in Italy, a classic reminder of what happens if we don't respect the planet. This now abandoned town was one of the last Greek communities in Italy, and the over-harvesting of its forest resulted in apocalyptic mass flooding. In the 1970s, following aggressive harvesting of timber leading to erosion on the city's slopes, a severe rainstorm caused a devastating flood that caused residents to run for their lives, leaving everything they knew behind. This 11th century town was washed away overnight, never to be inhabited again. This ancient town may have lost its livelihood, but you can still visit the town today and experience a real-life 70s time capsule. Kangbashi, China. Kangbashi is one of those bizarre cases where a city was built with all the necessary components of a thriving metropolis. However, it became a ghost town without anyone ever having lived there. Luxury apartment blocks, skyscrapers, office buildings, sports fields, and shops all exist in Kangbashi. However, this ready-made city seems to be void of any inhabitants. Yet this sprawling urban center was constructed to house millions of residents, but no one appeared to have ever moved in. The vacant city is located in an affluent region thanks to local coal and natural gas reserves, and people are in fact buying homes there. Most apartments in Kangbashi were actually sold. However, buyers aren't making the move to the ghost town. If you hate busy commutes and crowded streets, then this might be the perfect place to live. Ohardor-sur-Glane, France. This is the town that history almost forgot, but the French president, Charles de Gaulle, decided to never let the memory disappear. For important reasons, the ruins of this place remain uninhabited due to it being the tragic site of the murder of over 600 women, children, and men by a Nazi invasion during World War II. This abandoned town now serves as a permanent memorial and an important reminder of the atrocities of war. You can still visit the museum to pay your respects to the lives lost at this now deserted historical site. Fukushima, Japan. Our final abandoned city is the site of the world's most recent nuclear disaster. The devastating Fukushima accident was caused by a catastrophic tsunami in 2011, and to this day we still don't know the effects of the radiation released into the ocean. A forbidden zone around the reactor was formed after the disaster, and the fear of radiation took over many lives. 100,000 people were evacuated from the zone, and many locations of the city were left totally deserted. Grocery stores, arcades, and showrooms were left to decay in the aftermath, with so many people terrified of the effects of radiation poisoning that had been made famous by the huge nuclear disaster at Chernobyl. Many curious visitors have now started to enter the area, intrigued by the ghost town left behind. The surge in travel in these morbid locations has led to the term dark tourist, describing those who vacation at the sites of tragedies and disasters.